Good evening, everyone, and I am so delighted to be with the new ACDA Eastern Region President-elect, Dr. James Spillane, who is based in Connecticut. And I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity for us just to get to know Jamie a little bit. And so, Jamie, firstly, thank you so much for being with us, and we are delighted to welcome you to ACDA Eastern Region Board.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you, and I'm happy to be on board.
We were very fortunate to have a wonderful slate of candidates, and with Dr.
John, it's wonderful.
Warren from Syracuse University in New York, and so we wish to acknowledge him. And as we move forward, now it might be good for us just if you could tell us a little bit just about your choral background.
Yeah, yeah. I went to Ithaca College as an undergrad, and I sang with Larry Dobler there. Had loved choral music, and but I did things like I sang and danced at Disney World in between my junior senior year. So after I graduated, I went to New York thinking that I might want to be on Broadway, and I found I didn't like being poor in New York. So then I went back to the University of Connecticut. That was my home state, and I finished my education certification, and I got a master's. And then, strangely, I went and I taught in Puerto Rico for a year. I
Oh,
taught at a U.S. government school on the west coast of Puerto Rico, which was a wonderful experience. I thought, and I was a cello voice double undergrad, so I did both of those. But in Puerto Rico, I taught K through 12, everything, band, choir, theater, honor society, everything. But I met my wife, and she had left college for a year to come back, and she needed to go back to college. And and by the time we got to about February, she decided she needed to go back, and I decided I didn't want to be without her. So I said, if you go back maybe to Connecticut and finish your special ed degree, I will go back with you. So we did that, and I taught for a year in Fairfield, and then I taught for 14 years at Ledyard High School in Ledyard, Connecticut. And I was lucky there. When I got there, there was 42 kids singing, and when I left, there was a little over 400
wow.
in 10 choirs. So I was very lucky to be able to build a program like that. And we, competed a lot. We traveled. We sang, at ACDA Eastern Division, and about I got to the end of the 14th year, and I felt I wanted more. So my wife and I talked, and I decided to go pursue a doctorate after teaching for 16 years. And I went to the University of Arizona, had a great experience at the University of Arizona. Especially there were 22 choral graduates, so I have colleagues throughout the world, really, who I went to school with. And I got a job teaching at Iowa Wesleyan College in Iowa.
Mhm.
Stayed there for 7 years. Decided I needed to be back east a little bit. I got a job at Roberts Wesleyan College in Rochester, which was wonderful. But then the job at UConn opened, and I got the job at my master's alma mater back in my home state. So I have been now at UConn for 12 years.
That's
And
fabulous.
it's
Yeah, and I noticed that you had experience with vocal jazz as well. So tell us a little bit
yes.
about how that plays into your.
Yeah, well, we at Ithaca had a strong vocal jazz program. Dave Riley was there,
Mhm.
and I sang in choir with Peter Eldridge and Kim Nazarian, who
Okay.
were two of the New York voices.
Mhm.
So when I started at Ledyard High School, it was sort of at top of my list that we were going to start a vocal jazz program. Um, and we did, and we had a lot of success. We won the Berkeley Jazz Festival a few times, and my vocal jazz group actually performed on Eastern Division, which was one of the highlights of my performing career. It was one of those great moments where, gosh, I'm doing vocal jazz in front of my choral peers and vocal jazz isn't necessarily what everyone's looking for, but
Mhm.
it was one of those concerts where we finished and the ovation was huge and long, and we felt that we'd really done something,
Yeah.
that we had done something special that night. So I feel very lucky to have had my ensemble selected to perform at region ACDA.
Yeah, and you remind me at Penn State University where I teach,
Yes.
we've had a vocal jazz ensemble just maybe for the last 3 or 4 years, but every time I hear them, I think, gosh, it's um, such great oral skills training and harmony as well for
Yeah.
all of the students. And I'm glad that we have a vocal jazz immersion choir in Providence with
It's
Ned
awesome.
Rosenblatt from Berkeley. So I'm glad that we are able to include that in the convention.
Yeah, and I've known Ned for years, and in fact, when I directed the Iowa All-State Vocal Jazz Ensemble, he arranged one of the pieces for us.
Oh, great.
So
Great,
it's
great, great.
exciting. I've known him since he was a high school student at East Lyme High School here in Connecticut.
There you are.
Yeah, yeah.
Connecticut strong.
Connecticut
So
strong. We
there you
are.
are. So that's a nice segue to
Yeah.
another question I have for you, which is, in terms of memories of a region conference, do you have anything that sort of springs to mind?
Yeah, well, that memory of just performing there is one. When people ask what are your, maybe top 10 memories in choral music, that night was one of them. Um, because we felt really that everything came together exactly as it should be. And it's funny that the evening before we were warming up, we just went into the stage. And it was in one of those ballrooms at the convention center in Baltimore, and but it was next to where all the vendors had their music and everything. So we just decided to get up on stage and we started singing. And all of a sudden, the curtains open up and this man pokes his head out, and it's James Mulholland, uh,
Oh,
composer. And he comes and he sits in the front row and he just listens to our warm-up set. And when we finished our warm-up, and he says, he introduces himself, and I had explained that we had done two of his pieces just that fall. And he says, "You come see me tomorrow." And I went the next day to the booth, and he gave me copies of every one of his pieces and said, "You need to have these." And and he sent me a letter after, and that was one of those great moments where the thing about ACDA conferences is you make these connections. You
mhm.
make them with other choral directors, you make them with composers, you make them with musicians. I've sat and had meals with the King singers. When I was a young director, I remember sitting with two of the members of the King singers, and here's me. I was 30 or something, and I had just started an ACDA, and I'm having dinner with the King singers, and that felt surreal to me that I was lucky enough to spend time. But that really has happened at every region and national conference I've ever been to. Is that I remember going to Dallas. That was a national conference, but I got in late, and I'm sitting at a table. I hadn't had any dinner, so I sat down, and then this gentleman sits down next to me, and we start talking. And in the end, it was Ola Yelo, and we ended up talking for 4 hours, and I'd never met him before. But of course, we were singing his music, and we've become fast friends since there. All of that happens because ACDA synthesizes these choral experiences in one place.
Yeah,
I don't know if it would happen otherwise.
yeah. It really, truly, I think if you were to speak to most uh, choral professionals in the United States, ACDA would play a significant part in their professional development. And my first memory of ACDA is actually in 1995. I went to I come over from England to do a master's at Florida State, and it was the Washington, D.C. National
Yeah.
Conference. And that was the Moses Hogan Chorale
Yeah, I
were
remember that in
ensemble. And
Centennial Hall. I
wow,
I just blew the roof off the place and blew our concept
yes,
of, I spent time in Ithaca with William Dawson, who
uh-huh,
was the arranger of spirituals. And then you go to the concert with the Moses Hogan chorale. It's like, oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's even more we should know,
yeah, for sure.
and you keep learning. But
Yeah,
that concert,
yeah, it was truly, truly, to use sort of a more vernacular expression, mind blowing, right?
yes,
And the great thing with these region conferences is that because of the more intimate nature,
Hmm.
the chances of you actually being able to have those sort of direct personal relationships with performers, composers, conductors is really much more likely.
Oh, 100%. Um, I love both of them. I love both experiences. The national are great is because I've lived kind of all over the United States and done choral music in the Southwest and North Central. When I go to national, I get all of my world friends. But I've spent, I grew up in Connecticut, and now I've landed back in Connecticut, and New England is my home, and the extended New England. That's what the Eastern
Yeah.
region is. I went to school in New York, and so all of these other areas, and you can really cement those relationships in kind of your car driving distance.
Mhm.
That far, close enough that I could jump in my car and go visit them. Um, or our choirs could join and combine for events, and that's what Eastern is especially strong at, is creating those closer relationships.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're very excited to have you come on as president-elect designate. So on
Designate.
July the 1st,
Yes,
2024, you will assume the president-elect position.
yes.
And I'm curious just what you might be excited for in terms of leading ACDA over the next 4 to 6 years.
Yeah. Well, I think, we are in a time, we could call it a challenging time, but I think there's so much change going on that there's never been a time of more opportunity for ACDA to, I don't want to say reinvent, because the foundations of ACDA are really wonderful, but we need to expand and create a bigger circle of the music. And we do this, at UConn, in the music that we look at in choral literature, the music that we choose for our own ensembles, um, especially over the past 5, 6, maybe 10 years, we've changed what we're doing. So, I made a commitment six years ago that half of our literature was going to be music of women composers and people of color. And it's changed how I program,
Mhm.
right? And it's caused me to look so much deeper in repertoire and finding new repertoire. But it's just what should happen. And that's what we need to do with ACDA itself.
Yeah.
I know we did a conference in Connecticut. It was called Room at the Table.
Mhm.
There's room at the table for everybody, especially at ACDA. And I think our job is to be right at the forefront of bringing in everybody to the table, finding new musics, new expectations, but always expecting excellence. But everybody gets included, and our concept of what is literacy, our concept of what is classical choral repertoire, what is appropriate choral repertoire, we have to keep redefining that.
Yeah, yeah. And you remind me that we stand on the shoulders of giants, if you like. And I think really my first member of Eastern region deliberately seeking more diversity in all that we do is probably back to the 2020 conference in Rochester with Peggy, and then of course
Yep.
2022 with Penelope. And we're hoping that 2024 will help us to expand the size of the table.
Yeah.
And I am sure that by the time we get to this, seems like it's
Decades.
way in the future, 2028.
Right, right.
The Jamie Spillane conference will continue to broaden our horizons. So,
Mhm.
um, Jamie, once again, really just wonderful to have you on board on the Eastern Region board. And I'm sure that membership will enjoy this chance to get to know you a little bit. And they can certainly get to meet you in Providence from February the 28th until
Oh, I
March
can't wait
2nd.
to be in Providence in February.
And it'll be great to be with you. So thank you for your time, and we wish you all good things for the holiday season, and we look forward to seeing you in February.
Yes, indeed. Take care, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Appreciate it.
All right.
Good evening.